Hi, Rich Hoffman here. So we have to talk about the Somali immigrants in Columbus and the ridiculous position that Democrats have had on preventing ICE from coming in and picking up detainees. So let's talk about a little history. And I say Democrats because Mike DeWine, I look at him as a Democrat governor. The mayor of Columbus is a Democrat. Most of the people involved in the statements trying to hide the crimes that ICE is trying to pick up behind some Somali immigration. Now, years ago, back when Ted Strickland was the governor, there was an active recruitment that went on. There's a large Somali population, second largest in the United States, in Columbus, Ohio. Now, we know how bad the Somalis have been in Minnesota, and that has been made itself known as we've seen the behavior of them, especially around Minneapolis. It's one thing to say, we're going to give people an opportunity, we're going to recruit people to come in, and Ted Strickland certainly did that by putting an olive branch out and saying, come on in, Somalia, and any other disenfranchised group that's out there, we need people to do work in Ohio. And I don't think it's a matter of cheap labor as much as it's having bodies that actually show up and go do work. There's a whole bunch of discrepancies out there on job placement, and the first thing that people like to do is break down little categories. I think people from other places in the world are very hardworking people. They want to do well. They come for the American dream the way most people who are immigrants, and whether they came from Ireland or they came from England or they came from France, Spain, wherever they came from. People who come from other places and work hard to get out of the circumstances they were born into in those other places tend to come to the United States, and they work really hard. And that's the kind of, when you're saying, hey, we have this large immigrant population that shows up for work every day and doesn't necessarily do drugs, then, bring your factories to Ohio. So it was an economic expansion package, and that's how we ended up in Ohio with a large Somali population. And it's the same kind of deal that we had with the Haitian debate during Trump's campaign, and said that they were eating their dogs and their cats, and became a big campaign thing. Well, they come with different ideas about how civil life should be. And will they eat the pets? Will the pets disappear in your backyard? In some cases, they certainly do. And so the media wanted to make a big deal about that being discriminatory and shouldn't even make the statement. And Trump did very well by making the statement because it turned out to have truth to it. And then now you have these Somali people. A lot of them have been here for a long time, and they're already in these jobs and in different, filling different occupation gaps. Occupation gaps are not at the expense, and this is a controversial statement, but when you dig into the numbers, you'll find out it's not that they're taking a job away from somebody else. It's that the somebody else that you're trying to hold the job open for isn't showing up for work, or they're not passing their drug test, and they've allowed themselves to be depleted as individuals that aren't capable of being in the workforce. So when people are looking to locate jobs somewhere, they want to know there's people who are going to show up and work there. I mean, until you start getting robots that do a lot of this work, how are you supposed to bring industry into a state if you don't have any people? And if you have a high population proportion that's got depleted personalities, meaning they do drugs, or they have circumstances that they sleep in too long in the morning or sleep in over the weekend, and they just don't have the engagement, what are you supposed to do? Just not work, not produce anything? So I understand that when ICE started saying that they were going to come and have a crackdown on Somalis in Columbus, that they're concerned about all Somalis being afraid and being run out of town. And that's not what the Trump administration is doing. They're going out and they're picking up those who are radicalized. And why Somali as opposed to other demographic groups? Well, almost completely uniformly, Somalis are Islamic. They come from Muslim backgrounds. So the immigration issue is a mask for the real terror that has emerged out in Minnesota. And we don't want to see that happening in Ohio. And you start having these cells of Islamic radicalism that might be only 2% or 3%, but they hide in the background of these people trying to keep ICE out of their neighborhoods because it's been a progressive policy from the start. And people like Mike DeWine are certainly part of that. It's a Democrat idea, and they think that the spread of Islam is it's a Democrat platform point. They are okay with it. The problem with Islam, and again, it's another controversial statement, but if you look into the numbers, Islam is essentially the religion of the third world. You typically don't have people associated with high industry. I mean, you can go to Dubai and see there's a lot of Muslims there, but they had a lot of money that get poured into them from outside sources. So on their own, they don't actually go out there and start a whole lot of big businesses that are making themselves into tycoons. They tend to be good workers, but they aren't really good entrepreneurs. So you need both in any kind of society. And the problem with Islam is that you have an overwhelming amount of the one, but not the other. And so those who are trying to break themselves out of poor conditions are often they get wrapped up in criminal exploits. So that becomes a problem. That's what ICE is there to detain. Those who have a history of being problematic or a connection to problematic personalities. Now here's the main problem. Everybody's talking about Islam these days because the terrorists, you look down a list of all the terrorist activities, and most of them get traced back to Islamic immigration policies. So I've read the Quran many times. I explain everything. I feel like I have to always give that predecessor when I talk about the Quran to show that I have some authority. I've read the book. I know what it says. And my problem with the Quran, and I've read it extensively, I've given it plenty of chances to be some magical book. Problem is, it's another religion that started with a single person, whether it's Muhammad, whether it's Scientology with L. Ron Hubbard, whether it's Mormonism with Joseph Smith. You have basically some guy, an angel shows up and starts talking to him, they write a book. And that book becomes doctrine. There's no corresponding evidence to deal with it. So people who are pretty empty vessels find something that fills them, they get some wise words, they call them a prophet, and then all of a sudden it becomes a religion. And then other people who are in the same depleted condition start migrating to it. And right now the Quran is one of the hottest selling books in the world. And it's spreading, and it's becoming a real issue. And that starts having an impact on the status of your country. Because if you read the Quran, the kind of mind that evolves from that religion isn't exactly the kind of thing that's going to give you a stout economy. They might work hard, but they might not be out there starting jobs or doing things that are beneficial. And when they're frustrated by that, they might turn to radicalism. And you might have 98% of everybody's fine, but 2% are getting radicalized because they're frustrated in life. And then that means that the ideas then become dangerous. And so you trace the ideas back to the source, and you had some angel show up and tell one person something, and they wrote it down, and then it became a religion. Whereas in Christianity, this comes up because I like biblical archaeology. You study all over the Near East, and there's a lot of corresponding archaeology that validates what's read in the Bible. And you can also say that over many thousands of years, lots of contributors wrote to the Bible, and it collected into works that got passed from generation to generation. Those were discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you can correspond them. And over time, they've withheld a lot of scrutiny. And one of the ways you could say a religion is successful is if it outlives its initial prophets. So when it goes through scrutiny, then you find the evolution holds up, and it's a set of ideas you can build a civilization around. The problem with Islam is they basically say, believe Muhammad, believe that this angel came and gave him all this information every Monday in his cave or wherever he was writing it down at for a long period of time, believe it or you die. And that's just not the way it should be. They don't come out and say, sometimes they do. They imply that you have to give blind obedience to this thing or else pay a major price. So you have really a world full of people who aren't thinking too deeply about something, and this religion gives them the ability to keep everything very surface level, which makes them kind of dangerous in a republic where you're supposed to be thinking, not just following, and then not letting some set of ideas that were built over a long period of time and have really held the entire world's economy down to a substandard and what we call third world conditions, and then have those conditions start coming into your different communities. So if you have immigrants that come in, they have these different ideas. You don't see this with Hindus. Hindus aren't out there car bombing people. Muslim radicals do. They're the ones that go out and shoot and kill other people because they read something in the Quran and they think, and they take it in maybe the wrong way, but they're disenfranchised and they go radical and they start assassinating people. You don't see that from these other religions. You don't have Christians out there these days crucifying other people. They're out there generally forgiving everybody. The violence in the world overwhelmingly right now is being projected by one main religion, and these Somalis that are in Columbus, we want to head off the problems in Ohio that we're seeing happening in Minnesota before it gets to be too bad, before they take over and the ideology converts your nation, starting with the level of the state. When they can't comprehend the condition of a republic as it was built by Christian ideology, then you've introduced a whole new set of elements that wants to overthrow that ideology and overthrow that government, and that's a seditious condition. And you can't have whole neighborhoods of people doing that. So yeah, you have to identify that there's a sector of people that they might work well. They might work well in places that have industry and warehouse needs, and again, money, wages, whatever they are. I don't think it's about money. I think it's about people who actually show up and work. So you need immigrants. You want immigrants to come to fill the needs of your expanding economy, but they can't bring with them an ideology that's dangerous. They have to adjust and adhere to the rules of your nation. They can't convert it into what they ran from, because then you take away opportunities that should be there for everybody for perpetuation. But they've brought all the garbage that they thought with them, and then now they're trying to change your state, and they've become a huge voting bloc because they're not acknowledging any birth rates that are going to save the planet from climate problems. They're out there having lots of families and lots of kids, and they're growing and they're voting and they're changing the state of your country. So you have to do something about it. And so the first thing you do is talk about it. If they want to be here, follow the rules. The rules are clearly laid out by the laws of our society. You don't get a free shake, and we have people like this governor of Ohio, basically a Democrat, or this mayor of Columbus, who's running cover for him because they want to see that transition occur. That's why they align themselves with Islam. They want to see the overthrow of the Christian West. It's as Democrats, that's where they're at, and they call it fairness, but essentially it's the Trojan horse. And if you study it through history, years from now, that's what we're going to look back on these political movements and say about them. They're Trojan horses to convert your society and destroy Western thought, starting with the premise of Christianity, and replacing that with the intimidation of an aggressive religion that has been weaponized in a lot of cases, been weaponized to bring down Christianity from its heart. I would argue, based on what I know about history, that the Quran was written not as a thing of beauty, but as a weapon to destroy what was left of the Roman Empire and the Holy Land, and to erode it from within. And it was written in a way to take away the characters of the Bible and put them into their own book and then use that book to convert everybody away from Christianity. And that's been the fight of the Crusades. That's been the fight of now. It's been always weaponized. It was built as a weapon, not built as a way to get to heaven and live a good life and here and now and then the afterlife. It was built as a weapon to bring down the Western civilization. And that's my opinion about it after reading it many, many times. And you go through it, go look for archaeology that corresponds like you would biblical archaeology, and there really isn't anything out there. Where's the Dead Sea Scrolls version of the Quran? It all happened because Gabriel sat down with Muhammad and said, here's a story. And he wrote it down and then said, here guys, Gabriel came and saw me. The same Gabriel from the Bible that was talking to Mary. And here's what he said. And it's just as crazy as L. Ron Hubbard, writing science fiction books forever and looking to stay relevant, and he wanted to create a religion. So he took his stories and made Scientology out of it. Or Joseph Smith, all these early colonists were out there kind of missing the homeland or revering the security of Europe. Even if they were born in America, they still had parents and grandparents that came from overseas, and they wanted to bring their own version of the Christian world to fruition. And so he sat down, wrote a book. Some angel character came and saw him. He wrote some things down on some golden plates, and it became the Book of Mormon. Again, the problem is when you have one person sits down, writes something down, no one corresponds it, they put it into society, and off it goes. And then you don't question that reality. And that's a problem. And the problem with a lot of these immigrant populations that come from third world conditions, they did not have a culture that questioned reality. They'd only adhere to authority. And so the Quran speaks to them because it has a lot of authority in it, and it gives them substance, something to grab onto, and they feel that it gives them security emotionally. So it fills a role as a religion. But then when you have a few people who aren't quite there, you have 2 or 3% of that population could be radicalized and are out there plotting and scheming the down through of Western civilization. Well, now you got a condition of sedition that you have to go deal with. And you find it in these heavily Muslim populations of the Somalis in Ohio. And DeWine is a fool for not recognizing it for the threat that it really is and trying to push back against the Trump administration, because what he's trying to do with ICE is not allow the Somalis to become as problematic in Ohio as they are in Minnesota, because Minnesota got out of control. And we've seen it now recently because they've shown their radicalism. They stayed quiet for a long time, and then when they thought they had the levers of power going in their direction, they turned right. They showed their radical fangs quickly, and that's got people nervous for good reason. And now we need to have a crackdown on all those types of people that are out there hanging out and hiding in these communities, hiding their radicalism behind immigration efforts. And you have politicians that are really too stupid, like Mike DeWine, too stupid to do anything about it, because the threat is a serious threat. That doesn't mean every demographic of every immigrant is a problem, but often you can tell a lot about those immigrants based on the religion they have, and you have to be able to understand what that religion does to a culture you're trying to make within your workplace. And when you have people who are hostile and they have hostile ideas about that religion, it just spells out dangerous conditions that you have to avoid. And it starts with government protecting its society by identifying who those people are and what they have to do to deal with them. And ICE raids are a good start. Need a lot more of it. Anyway, it's Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.